It's a very interesting story, the transition from Colony Capital to Colony Digital. You're in the middle of it. Explain to us how you've managed to sell down commercial real estate as you've ramped up digital infrastructure just at the right time, it would seem.
Yeah, thanks. Good afternoon, Vonnie. Thank you for having me on the show today. You know, the journey for us at Colony Capital started over 2 years ago when Tom Barrick and I came together with the idea to create the world's first digital infrastructure investment fund called Digital Colony Partners. You know, as that fund began to deploy capital and had success, Vonnie, the board of Colony asked, can we do more of this? And last summer, we merged our investment management businesses together to create the largest global investment manager in digital real estate and digital infrastructure. And I give a lot of credit to our board and Tom to have the foresight and the vision to make a bet on digital real estate as the future. And as we look at what's happening around the globe today, and we see dislocation in traditional real estate models, one place that's held up incredibly well is digital infrastructure and digital real estate, as you see investors taking haven in tower stocks and data center stocks.
Right, so there's 4 verticals to what you do, and you mentioned a couple of them there: towers, small antennas, another one; data centers, another one. And obviously right now, these are all in supreme demand, right? So where are you now in the pivot to Colony Digital? Does this macro environment make it a little bit more difficult to complete what you had set out to do a couple of years ago?
Yeah, so listen, Colony is an interesting story today. There's 2 sides to Colony. Obviously, as we like to say, Vonnie, the defensive side of the football is playing the verticals that we have today in lodging and healthcare and our 30% stake in our mortgage REIT. On the offensive side of the football, we couldn't be busier today. We have 16 companies globally. We manage $22 billion of assets. Today at Colony Capital, 43% of our assets are digital. Contrast that to 2 years ago, where 2% of Colony's assets were digital. And so we're in flight and in process in making that move. And the way we make that move is really 2 ways. One, we've got to continue to invest in digital using our balance sheet. We've got to continue to put capital to work in our investment management platform. And then we have to have cooperative markets to find the right homes for the existing legacy Colony real estate assets. Last year, we had great success selling industrial, our real estate portfolio in Europe, our fantastic partnership with Scott Reckler, who I believe is on your show a little bit later. And so the markets cooperated, and we found the right places for those assets. And, you know, we've told investors to be patient. This is a 2-year pivot. We'll have time to find the right locations for our legacy assets. But in the meantime, our core focus is enabling America to communicate and enabling our communities to stay connected, and most importantly, to see that commerce continues.
Well, just on that point, what are we learning in this environment about network demand? I mean, your clients range from Google to Verizon, everybody who really needs bandwidth, who needs towers, who needs small antennas right now. What are they telling you about how demand is ramping up and about the idea that there's no peak or off-peak anymore?
This is the big thing we're hearing today, Vonnie. You've nailed it. You know, this notion of off-peak and on-peak, those lines no longer exist. If you look at some of the numbers that are coming out of folks like Verizon and Comcast. Comcast yesterday said there's been a 32% increase in in-peak hours. They're not even reporting the off-peak hours. Why? Because that demand is continuous. Connections to the cloud. Obviously, our children staying at home and taking their university courses in the likes of Zoom or Chime. And then thinking about the different applications that are running in our homes and thinking about content and entertainment later as our work days wind down and as our children's days wind down from school. There's no longer the notion that networks can be quiet or perhaps can be in a state of dormancy. I would offer you today that network constraints are more important than ever, and helping enable that infrastructure and putting more bandwidth to work is really seminal at Colony today.
So what concerns do the Verizons of this world have when it comes to being lenient with their customers, but then also needing to, you know, pay you guys? And obviously they would need more bandwidth at times like this. So there's a sort of, on the one hand, they have to be lenient. On the other hand, you guys have to offer them more and they need more. How does it all work, Mark?
Listen, it's a careful balance, right? I think the job that Hans has and the entire team at Verizon is not an easy one. They announced about 2 weeks ago they're going to put $500 million, Vonnie, of more CapEx to work in the mission-critical networks, establishing more fiber connections with One Fiber, obviously building out more small cells and macro tower sites to connect their customers. But Verizon's not alone. AT&T faces these challenges. T-Mobile faces the same challenges as they merge with Sprint today. Mobility is central to our ability to communicate and to conduct commerce. And so these networks, as we push from 4G to 5G, it's really that importance on applications, Vonnie, that is really going to enable the economy to move forward. And mobile networks, as you know, are at the core of applications today.
So, I can't help but think about the old cable cowboy, idea, right, Mark? In your business, whether it's small antenna, whether it's towers, data centers, and so on, you want to be gobbling up what's out there, because if you don't, somebody else will, and it's all about, just grabbing what you can. How is the environment for acquisitions? I imagine that before the coronavirus cropped up as an issue, you would have had your eye on things. Are you able to secure the funding to continue with those kinds of acquisitions? What's the deal environment like?
Well, listen, the deal environment is a bit frenetic at the moment, right? Obviously, liquidity is the central thesis of the day, Vonnie, as it always is, right? So having been a CEO in 1996 and 2001 and 2002 and 2008 and 2009, what I can tell you that I learned through those cycles is making sure that your balance sheet is in a good place, making sure that you've got long-term debt maturities and you have the sufficient liquidity to compete, but most importantly, to support customers. And so at Colony today, we've got over $2 billion of liquidity sitting at our 16 portfolio companies that serve the digital realm. We've got another $1 billion of capital that we have to deploy in Digital Colony Partners One. And then we have $1.25 billion of liquidity at our balance sheet. So we're armed with $4.25 billion of liquidity at Colony to compete, but most importantly, to serve our customers and to continue to serve communities. I would say the deal environment right now is those who do have liquidity are working hard. I would tell you that we have multiple deals that we're working on to bring to fruition, which we intend to announce over the next week or two. And we've never been busier. Our deal teams in London, Singapore, New York, Boca Raton, and LA are obviously out there trying to find the right opportunities to put capital to work, and most importantly, get rewarded with the right returns as we deploy that capital in a thoughtful way on behalf of our investors.
Right, and of course, you must be trying to reprice some of these deals now, Mark, are you?
I think that's right, Vonnie. I think everyone's looking at risk today, and we're all repricing risk. So for us, it's about the core model and the core return. So it's reducing exit multiples in models. It's increasing the spreads on debt over time. It's assuming, of course, less leverage today in models, of course, as well. Maybe having a little more churn on the core business, but we're stress testing our models. There is a definite, flight to quality in terms of the assets that we're looking at, and we're repricing risk every day at Colony across all of our verticals.
Yeah, you don't want to be taking advantage of people in this environment, but at the same time, you don't want to be overpaying now that there is a coronavirus sort of risk premium out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that discipline is seminal, right? So we have an investment framework. We've got a great investment committee at Digital Colony. And every day we're meeting for hours on end. We have our morning 8 o'clock investment committee. We have our afternoon investment committee. As you can imagine, these things are moving so fast and it's so fluid. And at the same time, down at the portfolio company, we've got to continue to support our customers. That's the most important thing, because they're the ones that are enabling our economy to move forward and enabling the things to happen at home and the ability for all countries, not just the U.S., Vonnie. This is a global pandemic. So our businesses operate in Latin America, Europe, and the U.S., Canada. And so we have to be thoughtful about that and make sure that what we're doing ultimately is enabling, our country and the other countries we serve to compete. It's no longer a, red issue, blue issue. You hear the words coming out of the president, Nancy Pelosi. This is about taking infrastructure forward and making sure that no one's left behind in the digital divide.
It's funny, it brings to mind WeWork in some ways, right? A few months ago, we were all talking about WeWork, and it does seem like now that suddenly the whole world was able to transition to working from home within the space of, just a few days, it feels like maybe the digital space is where all the virtual work takes place now.
I think that's right? This is the new normal, of course. If you think about the environment and what we're doing today, I've had, just this morning, I've had 7 video conference calls, and I've been connected to all of our key partners around the world, and there's been no disruption to what we're doing. And the way that's been able to happen is we've been able to very carefully build capacity, not only in the urban core, but really thinking about pushing those workloads and that capacity, Vonnie, out to the edge. And so as we think about the edge of networks, that's really where the activity is right now. So the suburbs, or looking at secondary markets or tertiary markets, the network has to perform everywhere. And so this is really the magic of what happens at Colony Capital across our infrastructure, is making sure that there's not a pinch point in the network and that there's no latency in terms of the disruption of the service, or that if you're downloading content, it happens in real time, because whether it happens at State and Main or whether it happens, out in the suburbs, the consumer really doesn't care where that is enabled. They have to have that same experience, and it has to be continuous.
When do you think the market normalizes, Mark?
Oof, I'm not in the business of catching knives, Vonnie, but what I would say, at least in our space, obviously we live in a fairly protected asset class right now. But, my hope and belief is that, we find a softer movement up the hill, less of a V shape, and that we get to a place in 30 days from now where we can hopefully begin to say that the worst is behind us. In the meantime, we've got a job to do here. And, we put our hard hats on every day, and we've got to dig trenches to enable more fiber. We've got to stack more towers. And of course, we've got to add capacity to data centers. So we'll try to do our part.